Just going to give you a very brief demonstration of the single most common fault with these KE-Jetronic ECUs. They're used on the M102, the M103, not the M104, and not the M119. They'll also be with the M116 and M117. Basically everything around that era prior to the more enhanced version ECU that has 3 rows of pins instead of 2. To open these up, there's 4 screws around the perimeter. They're either number 2 Phillips or, in this case, Torx head screws. And the closest thing I've got that fits is a T9 screwdriver. So I'll go ahead and open these up. So they simply slide out of the can. Pay attention to which way they went in, because it can go either way. It doesn't really make much difference, other than you won't be able to slot this into the housing when it comes to reinstalling it back in the car. That's the only problem you'll have. So these ECUs consist of a microcontroller side, which is the top side here. That's not where the problem is. And on the bottom side is where all of the magic happens that is controlling the KE-Jetronic. So the microcontroller and its software is on this top board. Where we need to be is on the bottom board. And it's simply 2 screws, 2 number 2 Phillips screws. Pop those out. So to flip over the digital board and get access to the bottom board, it is only these 2 clips here that need to be squeezed, and this connector reinforcing kind of arrangement just pops out. It's really very serviceable. You can see those. I've started to pop those out there. These 2 electrolytic type capacitors do fail, particularly this one here, because it's right next to this heatsink. It basically always ends up going dry. These Rhodostine ones are better and more long-lasting than the alternate supplier they used, Fracco. The Fracco ones almost always end up dead shorts, and you're getting really strange behavior when that happens. Like, for example, the ECU I just repaired, it was basically completely dead. Did nothing at all. It may as well have not even been there. So if you've got an ECU that's doing absolutely nothing at all, it is worthwhile just changing these 2 caps here. I haven't had any issues with this one here. That's not to say it can't fail, but that is quite good quality as far as I'm aware. I'll test it out of interest, but I don't believe it causes any issues. But hey, something this age probably can eventually. But definitely, these 2, just replace them. Value is 220 microfarads, and the original voltage was 40. That's kind of uncommon these days. Just get yourself a 50 or a 63 volt, 220 microfarad, and make sure it's at least 105 degrees Celsius rated. And it is also of a reputable brand. Don't just grab chintzy rubbish that you can buy for 10 cents, because this is going in your car. You want good quality, reliable stuff, not utter garbage. So if you're going to change them, get good stuff and do it once. Do it right. Even if they're still okay, I'd be changing them anyway. I haven't come across any of these style caps that are actually any good. Most of them are starting to crack up and leak the guts out of the interior. So yeah, just go ahead, change them. If it still works, as long as you don't damage the board, you're not going to kill it. You're actually going to extend its life, because if you leave them till they fail, you can actually ruin the ECU. It's all very simple, through-hole construction. Any idiot can work on this. It's not rocket science. Just make sure you get the polarity correct. Pay attention to how they are, which way is negative, which way is positive. You really can't screw it up. I suggest you just give it a go. You've got nothing to lose, especially if the ECU is already dead, because I have saved many of them just by changing those two caps. So these caps are now replaced. I've used Nichicon brand, 50 volt, 220 microfarad, 105C rated. The original cap that was over here tested absolutely fine, but there's no point leaving it there. This one here, as usual, because it's right next to this heatsink, even though this car has only 150,000 Ks on the clock, it's in good condition. Otherwise, this cap that was here was pre-failure. It was right at the very limit of an acceptable ESR reading, so it was gonna fail. That's what the original Roderstein caps look like. Very weird. The alternate supplier that's also in these Bosch ECUs is Fracco. If you ever see these, just change them. These are well known for actually going dead short, and if they do, they can damage the ECU. So regardless of whether these Fraccos test okay, just replace them. Get rid of them. They're old and they're gonna fail if they haven't already. So if you can do through-hole soldering, you can fix these ECUs. If it's doing nothing as far as the EHA valve is concerned, go ahead and change these caps. You've got nothing to lose. The circuitry for the idle speed control is also in here. It's not governed by the ECU side of things. It's actually an independent circuit, according to the training materials anyway. And I believe it's around this area because the M117 ECU that doesn't have idle speed control is actually missing this component here and a lot of stuff down here. It's just a guess. I don't have a circuit diagram. I don't know what the point of this story is anyway, but the main thing is just change these two capacitors. This one, as mentioned, rarely fails. I've never seen one fail. These test absolutely perfectly, so why touch them? Chances are something made today is not going to be as good as these anyway. I'm going to go ahead and change these two as well. From the 190, that's a much older car, so I suspect they will be in worse condition. That's both of those ECUs recapped now, and they should be good for another 30 years of service. And these can go in the bin, especially these. Anyway, hopefully you feel encouraged to go and recap your own ECU, especially if you have these. Just change them. So I'm just testing out a couple of ECUs that I have repaired for Trent's workshop. This first one here basically was completely dead. It had 0 milliamps at the EHA valve, basically at all times. Now I've already established that it's doing more than that after I repair, because there's 20 milliamps with key on, engine off, which I simulated on the bench, so that's already a good sign. In any case, we need a real car to test it properly, and that's what we're doing now. So I'm just going to have the air filter removed so I can tap into the EHA valve and monitor its current and just see how it's going. See if it starts and runs and idles this engine happily. It's already going to be doing more than it did before when it was handed to me. So let's see what it does. So already we can tell this ECU is doing more than it did before. There is approximately 20 milliamps with key on, engine off. Unfortunately, because of the way Chinese crap is made, I don't have sufficient clip leads to leave this on while the engine's running, because of course one of them is open circuit, because they're too cheap to put actual copper inside the leads of my clip leads. So you buy test equipment and it doesn't even work. Congratulations, made in China. Right, so all we're going to do is basically start it up, and I will monitor it by way of the duty cycle, because I don't have the tools to do it any other way right now. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're just test driving the M103 with the repaired ECU. Of course, Bright Spark Tim here had no fuel in the tank and it sucked in air, so it almost stalled. but we've got some more now, so it's running happily. Just going to get the duty cycle meter so I can test it properly. I couldn't achieve anything with the multimeter that we had at hand, so we'll see what it's doing in closed loop mode. So we're still driving around. About an hour later, we finally found the multimeter that does duty cycle, so we're going to go test that now. But in any case, it's been a good test for the ECU. I believe it's working perfectly, but we'll only know for sure when I see that oscillating duty cycle. Now that it's in, I'm pretty certain, closed loop mode. With the multimeter probe in pin number 3, which is our duty cycle connection, we can see that it is oscillating up and down. So it is definitely in closed loop mode, which means this ECU is working fine. Don't mind the crappy idle, because we still haven't got to the bottom of that. Yeah, that does that with any ECU. So there's still something going on with this engine that we haven't got to the bottom of yet. But moral of the story is this ECU is now alive. Remember, it was doing absolutely nothing before. It was completely dead. So, success. Now, we'll try the second ECU that I repaired. That one was overvolted from an alternator with a failed voltage regulator, and had about 16 volts pumped into it, so I don't have much faith in that one, but we'll give that a go anyway. Obviously I can't do a cold test start, it's going to be a warm start, but if it does anything at all, that's already a good sign. So let's try that one now. So we've just got the digital multimeter with this second ECU in circuit with the EHO valve. And we are seeing 20 milliamps with engine off, key on, which is a good sign. The fault with this ECU was that it was swinging wildly, like really wildly, plus and minus 400 milliamps, which is utterly ridiculous. That's completely unacceptable. So let's see how this performs now once we start it up. So go ahead. So the second ECU, I have the multimeter in milliamps mode in circuit with the EHO valve, and I am seeing it correcting the mixture and doing the rich lean cycling. So I will test these figures with all 3 ECUs, including the original, just to make sure it's in the ballpark of where it should be. And we can consider this one a good one as well. We're back on the original ECU to the car. Gotta wait for the oxygen sensor to warm up before we get any activity. Bearing in mind this oxygen sensor is over 150,000 Ks old, so it is due to be replaced. And yes, we're seeing the same kind of activity, so I'm happy with that. I would consider the 2 ECUs repaired. The second one, I can't do a cold start test for obvious reasons, but we're going to take that for a test drive now just to make sure it's happy and call it a day. We're now test driving the overvolted ECU, and it is working absolutely flawlessly. I don't know where the hell we are, but this is where Tim lives. And I believe we're going into a 100 km/h zone. Ooh-ah. That is considered fast when you're an Australian, because we're way over policed, and my goodness, it's raining. Why aren't we doing 20 kilometers below the speed limit? Oh, we are. Alright, so that's a success story on 2 repaired ECUs. Now I can reward myself with a good dinner and go the hell home. Just some bonus content here. I'm not used to seeing greenery in my part of the world, up north of Perth. I'm currently south where Tim lives, and I'm seeing greenery. This is very unusual, but then again, it is winter time. I don't really have any picturesque roads like this to drive on that are near my house. Otherwise, you would have seen me driving the 124 through them. This is the perfect, well, not really perfect because there's no curbs, it's kind of boring, but the scenery is nice anyway. The perfect place to drive your old Benz on this road. And what is this road called? Mundajong Road. It's about 45 minutes drive away from my house, so it's not very convenient to come down this way. Now we're going down a road called Light Body Road. Well, that's weird. I guess we're taking our Light Body 124 down Light Body Road. This is straight out of a horror movie. Is someone gonna jump out from the side and attack us? I don't know. If that happens, I'll turn the camera on again. Otherwise, farewell for now until I have something else to make a video about. This is kind of a rural area. I know I said that was the end of the video, but hey, someone might find this interesting. There's actually sheep out here and a very lonely house in the middle of nowhere. What a shame there's fences on the side of the road, otherwise we could go carve up the grass. But that's not very 124 behaviour though. Very, very picturesque. One last test for the rebuilt ECU is a bit of a thrash down to the 110 zone of the Freeway. So I think he can boot it any second now. Oh, that's disappointing. We didn't get to rev out first gear. The old M103 does get down and boogie when you give it some stick. Quite respectable. In any case, that's another good test for this ECU. It's absolutely working flawlessly.